My family chose my golden child brother's vacation over my wedding, but when I found out my parents lied to him saying I'd move the date without even asking me, I cut them off, and they never saw coming what they lost forever. I'm 32 years old. I work in digital marketing, and about 3 months ago I married Melissa, my girlfriend of 6 years, in a small but perfect ceremony. Sounds nice, right? Well, the thing is that my parents weren't there because they decided to go on vacation to Australia with my brother, Brandon, and his family, instead of coming to my wedding. And when I say they decided to go, I don't mean they had a trip planned from before or anything like that. No, they literally chose that trip over my wedding, knowing the date perfectly well, and then acted like I was the villain of the story. But let me start from the beginning because this goes back years, and if you don't understand the full context, you'll probably think I'm exaggerating or that I'm resentful for no reason. I grew up being the problem child, or at least that's how my parents, Edward and Dorothy, saw me. Brandon, my brother, is 8 years older than me, and he was basically the perfect child from the moment he was born. He got straight A's in everything, was captain of the soccer team, went to a prestigious university, graduated with honors, got an amazing job in finance, married young to a pretty girl from a good family, had 2 adorable kids, the whole perfect life like a TV commercial. I, on the other hand, was the mess. It's not like I was a delinquent or anything like that, but I did get in trouble at school. My grades were mediocre. I tried 2 university majors before finally finishing one. I had weird jobs for years before stabilizing, and basically spent my 20s trying to figure out what to do with my life while Brandon already had his own house, 2 cars, and an investment portfolio or whatever successful people have. The thing is that my parents never hid that Brandon was their favorite. And look, I understand it to a certain extent. Like, he gave them more reasons to be proud, I guess. But there was something beyond that. It was like I was invisible, unless I did something wrong. You know what I mean? I remember when I was like 16 years old, I won a photography contest at the state level, something that for me was huge because photography was the only thing I felt I was good at, and my parents were like, "Oh, that's nice, son." And literally the next day they left for the whole weekend to watch Brandon play an amateur golf match. A golf match. It wasn't even an important competition, just a club tournament. But there they were, driving 4 hours to watch him. I met Melissa when I was 26. I was working at a small advertising agency, and she was a freelance graphic designer. We met on a collaborative project and we just connected, in that way where you found someone special. She comes from a normal family. Her parents are good people. Nothing fancy but loving and present. And I think that's why it was hard for her to understand my relationship with my parents. The first few times they came to my house for family dinners, Melissa would ask me afterwards if she had done something wrong, because she felt like my parents barely talked to her, and I had to explain to her that no, that's how they were with me in general, that it wasn't personal. Brandon, of course, was always condescending to me, but in that subtle way that's hard to call out because technically he's being nice. Like, he'd ask me how my little job was going while he talked about his $1 million deals, or make comments about how it was okay that some people took longer to mature, with that little smile that made me want to punch it off his face. His kids, who are now like 10 and 12 years old, are good kids. It's not their fault they have an arrogant dad, but it's not like we have a close relationship either, because Brandon always kept a certain distance, as if I was a bad influence or something. So, like 10 months ago, I decided to propose to Melissa. We had been together for 6 years, living together for 3, and it just made sense, we wanted to formalize what we already had. I proposed to her on a hike we did to a mountain where we used to go. Nothing ostentatious, but perfect for us. And obviously she said yes. We called our families that same day to tell them, and my parents' reaction was like, "Oh, that's good. Congratulations. Let us know when you have a date." While Melissa's parents were crying with happiness and asking a million questions excitedly. 2 months later, October of last year, we had everything planned. We decided to have a small wedding, like 50 people maximum, at a nice but not over-the-top venue, scheduled for July of this year. We informed everyone 8 months in advance, sent save the dates and everything. I specifically talked to my parents in person, went to their house on a Sunday, told them the exact date, July 15, and they said perfect. They'd be there, that the place looked nice in the photos I showed them. My mom even asked if she could help with some of the organization, although, honestly, I knew it was more out of obligation than real desire, but I still told her, sure, I'd let her know. The following months were intense, planning everything. Melissa and I basically did everything ourselves, with help from her parents who were incredible, really. My parents asked from time to time how things were going but never really got involved, which didn't surprise me. Brandon didn't even ask. He just sent a message like, "Congratulations, brother, see you there." And that was it. I was okay with that. Honestly, my expectations with my family were pretty low at that point. Then we get to 2 weeks before the wedding. 2 weeks. We already had the catering confirmed, the seats assigned, the flowers ordered, everything ready. I get a call from my dad on a Tuesday night, like at 9 p.m., and from the tone of voice I knew something was up. He tells me, "We need to talk about the wedding," and I immediately get nervous, thinking someone got sick or something. I tell him what's wrong, and he drops the bomb, that it turns out Brandon planned a family trip to Australia, something he had apparently been organizing for months as a surprise for the whole family, and the dates coincide exactly with my wedding. That they're going to be out of the country from July 10 to 22, and that the wedding on the 15th falls right in the middle of the trip. I was literally speechless. I said, "You're joking, right?" And he says no, that it's a unique opportunity because Brandon got an incredible deal at a luxury resort and plane tickets, and that it would be a shame to waste that trip, that Brandon had been planning it specifically for the whole family to spend time together, something that according to him we hadn't done in years. I reminded him that I had told them the date of my wedding 8 months ago. 8 months. And he says, "Yes, I know. But this came up, and Brandon already paid for everything." And basically asks me if we could consider moving the wedding date. Can you believe it? 2 weeks before they're asking me to move my wedding because my brother planned a trip. I told him no, obviously not. That everything was already paid for and confirmed, that people had already made plans to travel, that what he was asking me was absolutely ridiculous. And he gets like defensive, saying he's just asking, that he understands it's complicated but it would be nice if everyone could be present, insinuating that I should be more flexible. My mom takes the phone at some point and starts with that she knows it's difficult, but that Brandon really wanted to do something special for the family, and that maybe we could postpone the wedding a few months, that at the end of the day it's just a date. I hung up the phone because I literally felt like I was going to explode. Melissa was there and saw my whole face of anger and confusion, and when I told her she couldn't believe it, she was like, "No, this can't really be happening. It has to be a joke." I spent that whole night, without sleeping, turning it over in my head, trying to understand how my own parents could do this to me. I called Brandon directly the next day, thinking maybe there was some misunderstanding, that maybe he didn't know about my wedding when he planned the trip. But the call confirmed everything. Brandon knew perfectly well about my wedding. In fact, he mentioned that he had planned the trip like 3 months ago, which was after I had announced my date. And his excuse was that he thought I could move the wedding without problem because it wasn't like it was a big wedding anyway. That's when I realized this was intentional. I don't know if it was a power play or if they just never cared about me enough. But the reality was that my parents had chosen a vacation trip with Brandon over my wedding. And honestly, even though it hurt, I wasn't as surprised as I should have been. It was basically the culmination of a lifetime of being second fiddle. I talked to Melissa that night and told her I had to make a decision. We could postpone the wedding, lose a bunch of money on deposits, move everything, cause chaos with all our guests, just so my parents could be present, or we could move forward without them. Melissa told me she supported me in whatever I decided, but that if I asked her opinion, she thought we didn't owe anything to people who clearly didn't value us. She was right. Obviously. I called my parents the next day and told them, "Okay, go on your trip, we'll postpone the wedding." I sounded resigned, like defeated, and I think that made them feel better about themselves because my mom started with, "Thank you for understanding, son," that she knew I was mature and they'd make it up to me later. Blah, blah, blah. I hung up and told Melissa, "We're getting married on July 15, exactly as we planned, but they're not going to know." And that's what we did. We didn't tell them anything more. We let them think we had postponed everything, and we continued with our original plans. It was liberating, really, to stop worrying about whether my parents were comfortable or if Brandon approved of our decisions. The last days before the wedding were peaceful because I didn't have to deal with calls from my mom, asking things, or passive-aggressive comments from my dad. We just focused on us and on the people who really wanted to be there. On July 15, we got married. It was perfect. The day was sunny. The venue looked beautiful. Our friends and Melissa's family were there, everyone happy and celebrating with us. My best friend was my best man. Melissa's dad gave me a hug that made me feel more like a son than ever with my own father. And when I saw Melissa walk down the aisle, I didn't think once about my parents. In that moment, they didn't matter. We had enough love in that room without them. Of course, we took photos, lots of photos. Melissa uploaded them to her Instagram that same night, like at 11 p.m. after the reception, because she was excited and wanted to share our happy day. We didn't think much about it. Honestly, we just wanted to keep those memories. What we didn't anticipate was the speed at which that information would reach my parents. Like, they were literally in Australia. It must have been like noon there with the time difference. And at 6 a.m. the next morning, I get like 15 missed calls from my mom, 10 from my dad, and like 50 text messages varying between confusion, anger, and accusations. The messages were like, "How could you do this to us? You lied to us. You said you were postponing the wedding. This is a betrayal. How dare you?" My dad sent a particularly long message saying he never thought I would be capable of something like that I had lost all his respect, that I was a liar and manipulator, that I had ruined their trip because now my mom was devastated and crying, and that when they got back we would have a serious conversation about my behavior. I was on my mini honeymoon. Like, we stayed 2 days at a nice hotel near the venue, and I wasn't going to let them ruin that. When I finally called them, like 2 days later, it was basically an hour of screaming. My mom crying, saying how could I exclude them from something so important, that she had given me life and this is how I repaid her. That what would her friends say when they found out they weren't at their son's wedding? My dad yelling that I had been dishonest, that if I had a problem I should have told them instead of lying to them and making them look like fools. I told them, "No, wait. You were the ones who chose a trip over my wedding. I gave you 8 months' notice, and you decided Brandon was more important. So don't come now acting like victims." My dad said that wasn't true, that Brandon didn't know about my wedding when he planned the trip, and I told him that was a lie because I talked to Brandon myself, and he admitted he did know. There was silence on the other side for a few seconds, and then my dad starts with that. I must have misinterpreted what Brandon said, that Brandon would never do something like that intentionally, that I've always had problems with my brother out of jealousy, and that I was projecting my insecurities onto the situation, basically calling me a liar and resentful at the same time. I told him, "You know what? I'm not going to have this conversation. I already got married. It was beautiful. The people who love us were there, and you made your decision. Now live with it." And I hung up. Melissa was with me and could see I was shaking with rage. Like that rage you feel in your whole body where you want to scream and break things, but you're paralyzed. She just hugged me and told me I did the right thing, that I didn't deserve to be talked to like that, and that my family was toxic. And she was right, but it still hurt, you know? No matter how much I tried to convince myself, I didn't care. It did hurt that my own parents chose my brother over me once again, even in something as important as my wedding. They came back from Australia like a week later, and apparently they couldn't wait to confront me in person because they literally went from the airport straight to my house. Like, I was in sweatpants on a Saturday morning having coffee when I hear intense knocking on the door, and there are my 2 parents with their suitcases still. They looked tired from the flight, but determined. I opened the door because, I don't know, I guess part of me still had hope that maybe they were coming to apologize or something. But no. They came in and immediately the same argument started again. That how could I? That I had been cruel and unnecessary to lie to them. That I had humiliated them in front of Brandon and his family. I asked them, "Are you ever going to acknowledge that you were the ones who chose not to be at my wedding?" And my mom says, "We didn't choose not to be there. You told us you would postpone the wedding." We trusted your word, I told her. I only told you that because I knew if I told you the truth, you would try to ruin it or make me feel guilty the whole time leading up to it. And honestly, I didn't need that negative energy on the most important day of my life. My dad turned red with anger and said I was a manipulator, that I had learned to be dishonest and selfish, and that if that's how our relationship was going to be, then maybe it was better we didn't have one. And there's something in me just broke. I told him, "You know what, Dad? You're right. Maybe it's better we don't have a relationship, because clearly it has never meant anything to you anyway. My whole life, I've been secondary to Brandon. Nothing I do is enough, and I'm tired of begging for scraps of attention and respect. Melissa and I got married. It was beautiful, and we didn't need you there for it to be special." My mom started crying again, saying I didn't understand how much they loved me, that they only wanted the best for me, and I told her, "If this is loving me, then I don't want it, thanks." I asked them to leave my house. They left, my mom crying, my dad indignant, and I closed the door and sat on my living room floor for like half an hour, just breathing. Melissa came out of the room where she had stayed to give us privacy and sat with me without saying anything, just being there. I didn't cry. I think I was beyond crying. I just felt this weird emptiness where your family is supposed to be. Like 2 weeks of total silence passed, and then I get a text message from my mom, super formal, saying that both she and my dad had reflected and wanted to apologize for how things had gotten. That they understood I was angry, but that family was important and we should talk. They were inviting Melissa and me to dinner at their house the following Saturday to try to reconcile. I talked to Melissa about whether we should go, and she told me it was my decision, that she would support me in whatever I decided. But that I should be careful because people like that rarely really changed. I decided to go because, I don't know, I guess part of me still wanted to believe they could change, or at least acknowledge their part in all this. We arrived Saturday night, and from the moment we walked in, something felt weird. The table was set for more than 4 people. There were like 7 places, and I asked my mom if more people were coming, and she dodged the question, saying we'd see. Giant red flag, but we were already there. We sat in the living room waiting, my dad making awkward small talk about the weather and traffic, and then I hear the door open, and in come Brandon, his wife, and his 2 kids. I stood up immediately and told my mom, "Seriously? This is an ambush?" And she says no, that she just thought it would be good for the whole family to be together to talk things through, that Brandon also wanted to be there to help resolve things. Brandon comes towards me with that condescending smile and says, "Hey, little brother, congratulations on the wedding. Sorry we couldn't be there." I looked at him and said, "You don't sound very sorry," and he laughs kind of nervously and says that obviously he is sorry, but it was a complicated situation. We all sat at the table, super tense atmosphere, Brandon's kids confused about why everyone was being weird, and my mom tries to start the conversation saying we were there to clear the air and move forward as a family. My dad starts saying we all made mistakes, but what's important is to forgive and forget, and I interrupt him and say, "What mistakes did you make exactly? Because so far you've only told me everything I did wrong." It gets awkwardly silent, and then Brandon speaks. He says he feels there's a big misunderstanding about the Australia trip, that my parents had told him that I had said the date of my wedding wasn't definitive, that I myself had said I was flexible about changing it. I told him, "That's completely false. I never said that." And I looked at my parents expecting them to say something, but they just stayed quiet looking at their plates. Brandon continues saying that when he planned the trip in April, my parents assured him there would be no conflict with my wedding, that I would understand and probably move it, and that he trusted that information. I asked him directly, "Did you know or did you not know about my wedding when you planned the trip?" And he sighed and said, "Yes, I knew, but Dad and Mom told me it wouldn't be a problem." I looked at my parents and told them, "So you told him I would move my wedding before even asking me, and then, when I told you no, you just decided to go anyway." My mom started saying that they thought I would understand, that Brandon had put so much effort into planning something special, and I just laughed because it was so absurd I didn't know whether to cry or scream. I told Brandon, "And it never occurred to you to tell them that maybe they should ask me first before assuming I would change the date of my wedding for you?" and he shrugged and said he assumed Mom and Dad knew what they were doing, that it was their relationship with me, not his. I told him, no, actually not, because if you really cared about your relationship with me, you would have said something. But let's be honest, you've never cared. My dad got defensive, saying it wasn't fair for me to attack Brandon, that Brandon wasn't to blame for anything, and I told him, see? Even now you're defending him when he was clearly part of the problem. Melissa put her hand on my leg, like to calm me down because she could feel I was about to explode. Brandon's wife was quiet but looked uncomfortable, and the kids asked if they could go watch TV because dinner was weird. I asked my parents, did you lie to me about Brandon not knowing about the wedding to make me look like the bad guy? And neither of them answered directly. My mom just said things were misinterpreted, and my dad said the details didn't matter as much as finding a solution. I told them, no, the details matter a lot because they confirm that you sacrificed my wedding to please Brandon and then lied about it so I would look like the villain. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern that has existed my whole life. Brandon tried to say something about how I've always been dramatic and resentful, and that's when I completely lost my patience. I stood up from the table and told him, you know what, Brandon? You're right. I am resentful, but not without reason. I've spent 32 years watching our parents put you on a pedestal while I have to beg for basic attention, and I'm fed up. And to you, I looked at my parents. Thank you for confirming that I'm never going to be enough for you, but at least now I can stop trying. Melissa stood up with me. We said, thanks for dinner, but we're leaving, and we got out of there. In the car back, Melissa asked me if I was okay, and honestly, I didn't know how to answer. I felt relieved in a way, like a weight had finally been lifted off me by confirming what I always knew. But I also felt this deep sadness because it meant I really didn't have the family I always wanted to have. When we got home, I blocked my parents and Brandon from my phone, from all my social media, basically from my entire life. It's been like 3 months since that. My parents tried to contact me through Melissa at first, sending her messages telling her to convince me to talk to them, but she never passed them to me until later, when it was already irrelevant. Brandon sent a long email like a month ago talking about how family should be united and that I was being immature. I read it out of curiosity but didn't respond. The truth is, I feel more at peace now than when I was trying to maintain a relationship with them. Melissa and I are planning our real honeymoon for next month. We're going to Japan, which is something we always wanted to do, and I don't have to worry about updating my parents or hearing passive-aggressive comments from Brandon about our decisions. Melissa's parents have basically adopted me at this point. I spend more time with them than I spent with my own family even before all this, and they treat me like a real son. Her dad asked me the other day if I needed help with something around the house, and when I told him no, he looked disappointed, like he really wanted to help. And that made me realize what a normal family relationship should be like. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, cutting contact completely. If maybe I should give them another chance or try to have at least some kind of superficial relationship, but then I remember how I felt at that dinner, being ambushed and manipulated, and I know I made the right decision. I don't know if I'll ever talk to my parents or Brandon again. Part of me thinks that maybe when I have kids, they'll try to reconnect to be grandparents, and I'll have to decide at that moment if I want them to be part of my children's lives. But for now, I'm okay without them. Melissa and I are building our own family, our own life, surrounded by people who really love us and value us, and that's enough. I don't need the approval of people who are never going to give me what I need, and I'm finally at peace with that.